Exactly.
Whenever you guys are ready.
It's funny. It's funny. People, when we talk about mushrooms, everyone wants to talk about psychedelics because everyone had their like little thing in the '60s or '70s and shrooms. There's a hell of a lot more to mushrooms.
Yeah,
than
there's
psychedelics.
a lot more. But it is an interesting conversation starter, I guess. But it is a kingdom, and that's like the first misconception. Even people on a, let's say, plant-based diet, they think like, I only eat plants, but then also had mushrooms. And mushrooms are a separate kingdom from plants.
Huh.
And so that's kind of fascinating.
Just for people who don't understand kind of the hierarchy of that, was it kingdom, genus, species, something?
Yeah.
It's been a long time for me.
So if we go back in time, a little question on the exact dates, but about 1.3 billion years ago, mushrooms came from the sea. They were first thing to come to the land, dry land. And these mushrooms, this own kingdom, own world, totally separate from other types, were starting to munch rocks. So they were living beings that were eating rocks and then creating soil. And about 600 million years later, so about 700 million years ago, plants started growing. So they were very separate from each other. And actually, about 10 years ago, scientists figured out that we humans actually came from mushrooms, not from plants. So we are part of the same super kingdom. And mushrooms, like here's one mushroom, Reishi, they breathe oxygen like we and expel CO2. So meditation stuff and breathing stuff, they're like us, so whereas plants are reversed. So they're part of the same, but then it was split into a few things. So animals, animalia, plants, plantae, fungi, bacteria, and then these kind of like single cell species or simple.
Protozoa and all those guys. So hold on a second. The mushrooms come first out of the water.
Correct.
Start chomping on the rock.
Correct.
Creating
soil.
Creating the soil that then eventually started to kind of create the atmosphere for the plants to then root down and do their thing.
Correct.
In a way.
And so fungi still today, they're very good for the soil, and they're actually like breaking down, composting organic matter. So we need it for everything, including growing plants and for a lot of other stuff as well.
How did you get into this? You're a guy from Finland, and so people don't really know the shamanism and the kind of the abstract thinking that came from there. When you think shamans, you think Peru.
Yeah, totally. So yeah, I grew up in Finland at our family farm. So I'm the 13th generation of our farm, and it happens to be in a very kind of a focal point of organic farming, very famous for organic farming. One of the most famous herbalist places is our kind of neighbor. And I grew up there. My dad is an agronomist. My mom teaches physiology and anatomy. And they put me into this foraging school where you collect mushrooms and berries that my great-granddad started. So think of like Waldorf meets Steiner type of school. So that's my background to it. Attended my mom's classes, learned a lot. And then just out of passion, I studied, my first degree was in chemistry. That helps a little bit. Studied nutrition, but a lot of the stuff is like first-hand learning and coaching people. So about 12 years of like helping athletes and whatnot. And about 10 years ago, I bumped totally by accident into this like Japanese truffle called matsutake, which was thought that it doesn't grow anywhere else except this northern island of Hokkaido in Japan. And then me and my college friend, pretty much as a joke, entered this innovation contest in Finland, and won an innovation award for finding the mushroom growing also in Finland, because it's very expensive. And yeah, it kind of started as a joke. But then, sometimes in life, certain things just stick, and the more it's like a rabbit hole. The more deeper you go, the more excited you get almost. So
sure,
that's what happened to me about 10 years ago.
So there's a big, like Europe for sure. I remember as a kid, I'd visit my family in Switzerland. My uncle, who was Swiss, would just take me out foraging for mushrooms.
Yeah.
And as a kid who grew up in America, I'm like, I don't even know what the hell this guy's doing, and they all look the same to me. But it was like this passion of his. And so there is this kind of like undercurrent of mushroom hunting, farming, not farming, but like gathering in the European culture.
Yeah.
And did it come from kind of earlier shamanic traditions?
Yeah, pretty much all indigenous cultures would have used mushrooms, because once you go foraging, you quickly realize that there's a lot of medicine out there. There's not a lot of calories out there. So that's why, things like mushrooms are amazing also to get actual like calories to live on. So most cultures originally were mushroom friendly, But then there was a couple cultures that would get mycophobic. So for example, Anglo-Saxons, one of the reasons why North Americans are kind of behind the mushroom trends compared to the Orientals and the Europeans is because probably some fungal diseases. So when we talk about fungi kingdom or any kingdom, there's things that can kill us, and then there's things that can heal us or help us. So think of animals. Not all animals are friendly. Some of them are most of them are not domesticated. Same with plants. Some things can totally kill you, and certain things can heal you. So same with fungi. And there's certain fungi that are really bad for you, candida and molds. But then there's a big part of them that are actually good for you. So certain cultures would just hit bad. And even within Europe, for example, in southern Germany, there's more mushroom-friendly people. And it was because the Slavic came to like Bavaria, southern Germany, and they got excited about the mushrooms. So generally, like Eastern Europeans, Northern Europeans are more mushroom-friendly, and then kind of the British are a little bit less than the others. But
interesting. I wonder how much of it has to do with climate and kind of the fogginess that creates mold and all the things that were causing trouble with their climbs. But who the hell knows?
Yeah.
Dave Asprey's a good buddy of mine, and he's actually going after the black mold and all that.
Yep.
And he started teaching me a lot about this early on. It's just like, hey, there is an entire universe. And that the fungal, kingdom has to work with a dynamic balance in bacteria, and a lot of stuff that we're seeing with mold and infestation, all that, maybe because of our rampant use of, insecticides and fungicides and all these things that have wiped out the balance there.
Well, there's a lot of truth to that. So, but the funny part is, as we're talking, you're breathing in mushroom spores. So as every breath you're taking, or if you're meditating or you're doing Qigong or whatever, you're breathing in mushroom spores. So that's part of us. But the fact that mushrooms and bacteria have suffered from this like food racism almost in the last few decades. You have to be honest, like people are debating, should I like plants or animals, or like what should I do and what's my macronutrient ratio and whatnot, and we've forgotten the whole so now it's cool that sauerkraut is trending, or people understand the difference between good fungi and bad fungi. Dave Asprey, for example, is for sure taking medicinal mushrooms as part of. So a lot of people who also notice of the bad kind of mushrooms are also know a lot about the good kinds as well.
Sure. So we're talking about culinary. We're talking about medicinal, and then we're talking about the fun stuff, the psychedelics, which is a very different subclass. And I personally, I will go on record and say it is a form of medicine. It's a powerful form of medicine. I just think that it's abused by people who go to Disneyland and be morons on it versus using them for that. But that's not this show, right? Yeah. This show is about the medicinal value and what we can do and how we can find just so much variety and interest in a kingdom that it's almost, I should retitle the show The Forgotten Kingdom.
Yeah. So just a quick note on the psychedelic, because it's a topic that comes up. A lot of people, when you talk about mushrooms or shrooms or whatever you want to call it, it's a topic that people think about, and it is there, and you can study about it, and it is used, for example, where I come from, for seasonal depression, because mushrooms are one of the few sources of vitamin D. So when there is Finland, for example, is on the same level as Alaska. So summer you have 24 hours of sunlight, but winter is pretty dark. So so how to get vitamin D? So it can be used for medicinal and health purposes as well, but the most focus is on these two groups. And these are the culinary mushrooms or nutritional mushrooms. And then there's these medicinal mushrooms. And if I put it on layman terms and kind of oversimplify, the culinary mushrooms give you protein. There's usually, good source of a non-animal based protein. They have some micronutrients like vitamin D and minerals, iron, zinc. People, for example, that might have thyroid might be useful. And they tend to be edible, so you can chop them up. Now, there's another group of mushrooms that are these medicinal mushrooms that tend to grow on trees. That's also a thing that people don't realize, that mushrooms can also grow on trees. A lot of them grow on trees. And you have to prepare them. You have to cook a soup or a tea, or what you call a decoction or tincture. So you do an alcohol extraction out of them. But they offer these amazing benefits. And actually, surprisingly, about 40% of all pharmaceuticals use fungi. So they're partly derived from fungi. So there's, out of the 20 best-selling drugs in the world, about 10 use fungi. So it's an unbelievable world that has a lot of scientific evidence-based stuff. So it's not all new agey stuff, but it's actually pretty well. Penicillin is
the quintessential example, right?
Exactly. So So there's a lot there. Obviously, we're discovering constantly more. A few years ago, there was a drug made for MS disease, which is kind of an uncurable disease for a while, that Novartis, a Swiss drug company, made using a Cordyceps strain of Cordyceps mushroom. So it's surprising that it's coming more and more out, but it's definitely well studied.
So, and this might be getting a little off topic, but it's just my brain wanting to cruise on this, is the original guys who came out of the ocean started chomping rocks and creating soil.
Yeah.
So now these guys look like they've eaten trees.
Yes. Sometimes I even joke that one of the optimal diets is to eat the soil and the trees. But because we can't eat the soil, we can't absorb it, we take things that grow from the soil. And we should eat trees, but a lot of people have removed that from their diet. So having, sap from birch or maple, or having medicinal mushrooms that grow on trees bring a lot of amazing health benefits. So a lot of, for example, chaga, this is the kind of the king of the mushrooms. There's 46 different drugs derived from a compound found in chaga, betulin and betulinic acid, and it's actually from the cover of the tree that grows in. So it's from the birch, but the kind of chaga has utilized it. So it's fascinating how the mushroom can take some of this like life force or minerals or nutrients or however you want to call it from the tree and make it into a way that we can also utilize it.
So this chaga, may I see it?
Go for it.
So it doesn't even look like a mushroom in some ways, right? It looks like a piece of wood.
Yeah.
Right? So this is a mushroom spore-based organism that grew out of birch, right? So it almost feels like wood.
Yeah. It
is. Because
is.
that's what it ate.
Yeah, it doesn't look like your stereotypical portobello mushroom, does it?
Right.
So,
it doesn't have the same shape. It doesn't do the same.
And you can chew it, as you can see. So that's one of the, you would have to cook it.
Decoct this.
Yeah, you would cook it into a tea. It was actually, funny enough, it was used as a coffee substitute during the Second World War. So it's a great when as an urban monk, if you want to find alternatives and ways how you can substitute or reduce the amount of caffeine, chaga is one of the more fascinating ones.
Tell me about the health benefits of this.
So chaga is gram per gram probably the highest source of antioxidants in the world. Now this is a thing that the internet loves to debate, but the ORAC values of that are kind of off the charts. So there's especially this SOD, superoxidase dismutase, very high in it. So what antioxidants can do is lower inflammation. The name chaga originally comes from Russia, so it was used there mostly for like colon health. And we can go deeper into that, how mushrooms and the certain compounds like polysaccharides can help with gut health and macrobiome, but especially for like skin inflammation. What is also high in very like certain minerals and trace minerals like zinc and other things. But I would say most people would drink it will feel support in immune system, skin, and inflammation. So I use it mostly for travel. It's great for that.
In what capacity? Just to boost your immunity?
Yeah, so that's interesting. I find like people don't care about the immune system. It's like some of those topics that people just don't, unless they're sick, they just don't give a shit, So it's like, unless you have a flu or cough. And then when you have it, what most people do is they go for these immunostimulants, the garlics and the echinias and other, which work, but they stimulate you. They stimulate your immune system. When your natural, security officers, your natural killer cells and macrophages have gone on a vacation and left your house unguarded, and you get an intruder, then you put them to work and put them. But there's also a very common situation when people's immune system is hyperactive. When they're like, the security officers are not letting even your family members enter the house, and that's a lot of like allergic reactions. Autoimmune disorders come from that when they're attacking your healthy cells. And what mushrooms do, they're immunomodulatory. So it's kind of like driving on a highway and putting your cruise control on 60, and if you go too slow, it's going to speed you up, and if you try to speed, it's going to slow you down. So that's what mushrooms do. So they're one of the few that does it. So they help with both, possibly can help with people who have been sick all the time, but also people who have this inflammation and autoimmune type of like overstimulation.
So is that all mushrooms or the ones that have adaptogenic qualities?
Not all mushrooms. So like any kingdom, there's good and bad kinds.
Right.
When we talk about medicinal mushrooms, we talk about, a few hundred mushrooms, and especially like the top, 5 to 10 mushrooms, they've pretty widely studied. These are chaga, reishi, turkey tail, shiitake, maitake, just to name a few. So these are great. Most of them grow on trees, but definitely out of estimates vary from hundreds of thousands to a few million of different kinds of mushrooms. Only a few hundred have been seen to have these medicinal properties.
Interesting. So most of the good stuff grows on trees. This is chaga. This is reishi.
Yep.
And it looks very different. Obviously, it's got kind of a regal red about it.
Yeah.
And this grows on what kind of trees?
So this is interesting, actually, like when you think of an ecosystem. So birch is a pioneer. So when we think of the most nutrient-dense things in the world, they tend to come from when the ecosystem is about to get born, or it's in its end of its life cycle, or it goes on a circle. So birch is, in the Nordic countries, it's the tree that comes when, if you chop everything out, it comes first. Then it's going to build the soil, the phosphorus for the next tree, which is like the spruce, and then finally comes pine. So my dad also takes care of forest, so I'd learned a lot about how it works. But so essentially what it does, it's a pioneer. Think of an olive tree in the Mediterranean or something like that. Or and then the forest goes hundreds of years and it comes end of its life cycle. So hemlock, for example, is kind of at the end of the life when it's an old grown forest or something like that. And then comes reishi. The reishi is said to be the queen of medicinal mushrooms, and this is said to be the king. And they have partly similar benefits and partly different. But it's funny that a lot of the healthiest things on the planet come from they're pioneers, they're extremophiles, when they grow when nothing else grows, or they come in a lush environment when the forest is really, really, really old, or when the rainforest the biodiversity is amazing and there's all kinds of birds and animals and plants.
Interesting. So this guy, the chaga, is living at the place where the original kind of kingdom was breaking inorganic matter into organic. So at the beginning of the life cycle, they're basically working to create life from inorganic. And that, like, there's fulvic acid, there's a lot of really interesting kind of research in that space. This is kind of where it all springs and begins. So I could see how there's...
And it usually involves another matter like fulvic acid is rock, or in this case it's the birch tree that is actually hurt. So this is actually kind of a parasitic fungus. It comes when the tree is hurt and it lives in a symbiotic or parasitic capacity with the tree. So it's also very fascinating how they're all interconnected and how different matters and organisms work. But not to get too crazy on it, I brought you a gift related to that. So the indigenous people, the First Nations, the Native American or Indian of our land, the Sami people, so they live in northern Norway, Finland, Sweden, and they have a tradition of having this kuksa mug, and it's made from the same tree that the chaga grows in, so it's the birch tree, and they carve it. And there's a saying that nobody will ever really own this mug. You just take care for the next generation. So this is for your kids and grandkids.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm honored.
And
it's beautiful.
It's awesome in a way that you don't have to wash it. You just rinse it. It'll get darker as years go by, but it's all good.
Fine by me. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
This is great. So I'll be drinking mushroom tea out of this. So I personally come from a tradition where I've studied a fair amount of Chinese herbalism, and there's a lot of really interesting stuff on adrenal fatigue and just kind of bouncing back from the lifestyles that we've all been saddled with. And so Cordyceps, there's a few others, a reishi, which we've talked about, but there's a few others that kind of spring up. Can we talk about the medicinal value of this and kind of the dual direction value for people who are just beat up in our modern world?
That's actually great, because the Chinese, we have to a lot to thank for the knowledge that we know about mushrooms. We have to thank the traditional Chinese medicine. They're really pioneers on documenting it. We can assume that all of these indigenous cultures would have used them, but they really documented it. And especially for the health benefits point of view, they were really specific in how it helped for generation after generation. And we know that especially reishi, or reishi is actually a Japanese name, they would call lingqi, is how it works, or cordyceps. Both of these are the top most prestigious herbs, as they call it, even though they're in the fungi kingdom, of the traditional Chinese medicine. So I think for an urban citizen who wants to be an urban monk or already on the way, I think one of the interesting ones is the cordyceps, because it was used for adrenal support. And who is not stressed out in general, and who does not have a few too many cups of coffee or stimulants? So rebuilding that. It was funny, they actually found Cordyceps hain in Tibet by looking at these animals grazing on this mushroom, and they were so tired at first, but when they ate this mushroom, and they got all this energy. So then the people And we're like, oh, we should probably try that as well. So it's funny how observing animals you find this. So it's used a lot for lungs, so people who have asthma, and people for lower back pain. And what then Western research figured out, that actually improves oxygen intake, which is obviously one of the absolute fundamentals in health and wellness is breathing, meditation, yoga, qigong, running, whatever form it is, getting more oxygen in your lungs. So what this seems to do is these compounds, few compounds in Cordyceps, help the ability of us getting more oxygen in our lungs. So used a lot by runners, triathletes, MMA fighters, but for an average person, just getting more oxygen in your lungs and supporting your adrenal glands, so being a little bit adaptogenic, is probably a quite nice hack. By just adding it to your coffee or having a Cordyceps tea can hopefully help with rebuilding your adrenals. So
I got a question about delivery on that, because traditional Chinese medicine will do like a sun, right? Like it'll, let's cook this stuff together, let's extract the active ingredients, and let's get the sauce, the soup, and drink it. Whereas a lot of kind of herbalism we see now, you don't really go through the extraction process. I mean, I could see like, just ground up bark in a gel capsule and some, it's like, how do I know what form to take of this for the optimal delivery? Because nowadays you'll see tons of Cordyceps on the shelves, and like the consumer wouldn't know the difference.
Totally. And there is no shortcut to it. You have to know what part to use. You can use the leaf when you're supposed to use the roots, or in the case of mushrooms, it tends to be the fruiting body, the visible part. If you ever go foraging mushrooms, the part you see is the part you would use usually. So you would have to know, and there's actually several hundreds of different types of Cordyceps. So it's Cordyceps sinensis is the variety that has been most traditionally used, and there's many strains of Cordyceps sinensis, and that's the Cordyceps strain number 4 is the most famous one. And it's, like I mentioned, a lot of these medicinal mushrooms are inedible, which means that they have this substance chitin, which is kind of the same substance if you would try to eat lobster shell, you can't eat it. So what they did with that cooking is essentially they kind of extract it, or think of a bone broth. It's like how you extract the goodness out of it. And you would actually, that's only part of it. The water will only extract part of it, and then alcohol or certain lipids can extract the other part, which is the fat soluble compound. So not to go into the nitty gritty of it, you have to extract it, you have to cook it. Preferably you have to tincture it or do both, which is called a dual extraction. You have to choose the right strain and the right part of the fungi. And different mushrooms or herbs might have different things. So you gotta kind of do your background research on it, or otherwise you might pay $60 for capsules that don't do anything for you. Like that happens a lot. So
there's a lot of expensive urine.
There is
in our world, and people don't know the difference. So the consumer is kind of stuck. So I love,
if you don't do it, you're eating sawdust essentially in a lot of cases. So it can even hurt your digestive tract. So
sure. Yeah. It doesn't sound like a good thing
to
pass through you.
Yeah.
So in terms of looking at how the adrenals are just beat up, Cordyceps seems like a good opportunity for everyone to kind of just bring things back.
It's like a Jing thing. If you go to TCM, so it's great to help rebuild your adrenals. Works the kind of the HBA axis from a more Western point of view. So it's fascinating how it does. Like with a lot of the adaptogens, we're not quite sure how it actually does it. Like we know some of the isolated compounds that might work it, but we seem to have this non-stimulated but energizing effect of it. So that's what we've kind of figured out. And it's been used for 2,000 years, so it's nothing new though.
It's not toxic. It's like we know that this doesn't hurt people.
The FDA considers most of these mushrooms as food, so they're generally regarded as safe. So they're not even supplements. They're often sold in capsules because they usually taste bad, so bitter. So that's why they're used. So if one of the mushrooms is an upper and natural energizer without caffeine, it's Cordyceps, and Reishi is the opposite, which is kind of the calming but not sedative. So for people who have sleep issues, for example, helps again like the glands, the endocrine system, but in a more like calming, grounding way. So it would, in a TCM system, it would have more Shen, and we see it used for like blood pressure and blood sugar type of stuff on Western research, and we see it kind of as a grounding one.
Would you take it as a tea? What time do you take it? Like how quickly, like before bed, like to decelerate?
Yeah, I normally would recommend 30 to 60 minutes before bed, just that if you're sensitive, you don't want to pee, in the middle of the night. So, but the fascinating part about these is these adaptogens are good in the morning and in the evening, but Western people just don't get that. So they want to know. So Cordyceps is morning, afternoon, Reishi is late afternoon, evening.
Tell me what to do.
Yeah, tell me exactly when and how. So,
yeah, great. And Reishi is something that you could get pretty much anywhere.
Pretty much. And I would say Reishi along with ashwagandha are some of the safest and most studied things for stress management from if you want to kind of use the super herbs and superfoods. So
Ashwagandha, give us a little background on that, just because you know, people hear about it all the time, and I know it's not necessarily the same wheelhouse.
Yeah.
What is it? Is it?
It's sometimes called as an Indian ginseng. Seems like some of the best.
But it's a root. It's not. It's not a fung. It's not in this kingdom.
No, it is. It is.
It
it's
is.
a plant. No, it is not. It's a plant. It is a root. And so mushrooms like Reishi and Cordyceps are often lumped into the same group of these adaptogens, or rasayanas or emperor herbs, or however you want to, different names. But it's essentially two-directional. So they're not stimulative or sedative, but they have somewhat an element of an uplift and stress reduction both. And so ashwagandha would be like the top Indian probably, and then we have rhodiola, which is the top Nordic, and you have Siberian ginseng, which is, none of them are ginsengs actually, they just called ginseng, or suma root in South America, or maca in the Andes. But ashwagandha would be a root that would probably help with stress reduction. So.
And it has some kind of buffering elements that help with cortisol levels, from what I understand it.
Yeah, a lot of the adaptogens, including Reishi and Cordyceps, work the blood circulation, and kind of like I drove to meet you, and it was like a few hours of traffic, and you're in the traffic.
Oof,
but once no, that's okay, because once you have these adaptogens, it kind of helps your blood pressure, and you have this buffer. So you get this like safety, you know, essentially, once you've started to consume different kinds of adaptogens. That's what I've seen from my own life. I just don't get stressed that easily anymore. There's a limit when you do, but you get a little bit of a buffer that I didn't used to have. So
I call it a fuse lengthener.
That's a good name. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's really hard in the world that we live in to not have adaptive qualities, because you will snap, you will kill people.
Oh yeah, totally.
Right. It's too much, especially in Southern California traffic.
Yeah.
So thank you for making it out.
Yeah, no worries. Happy to be here.
So a lot of people I know are starting to kind of mess with this stuff, trying to hack their caffeine consumption.
Yep.
And find ways to stimulate without aggravating. So what would you look at as a strategy for that, and how would you go about it in a healthy, kind of sustainable way? Yeah,
I've been playing with mushrooms for quite a few years, but the fascinating part is that, like, for example, the immune system, people just don't care. But whenever you talk about a better for you coffee or a way to manage the coffee, it usually gets people's attention.
Yeah.
And so that's actually probably one of the first ways how you can start. And there's a few reasons for it. One is that coffee, while having antioxidants and brain, supports possibly against Alzheimer and other things, we all know that it's kind of a devil, isn't it?
It ain't great for you.
Yeah. It has certain benefits, but it's like a lot of these modern day things from smartphones. It's a bad master, but if you use it as a right tool, it's great. And what couple of the big problems with coffee is, just name like 3 big problems. One, it's a very acidic forming. So for example, that's what my dad, for example, kind of like how your stomach handles it. The other one is that it's kind of taxing for the adrenals, which we kind of already addressed. And then thirdly, the blood sugar impact of it. So I guess you had some experience of that, how that can then accumulate to other things. If your blood sugar just goes up and down, you must start craving for like sweets and other things. So essentially mushrooms surprisingly help with all of them. So Cordyceps for your adrenals, or Reishi for blood sugar, and the Chaga that we talked about was used as a coffee substitute during Second World War when there was lack of coffee beans. And it's because of the minerals and trace minerals, it's very alkaline forming, so it will make the coffee a lot more smooth. So you can either try to replace your coffee habit with this mushroom tea elixir, or you can add, even better for people first, add it, and you will not notice a big difference in the flavor if you add a little bit of mushrooms to your coffee. So that's a great hack, how you can reduce the acidity and also support your adrenals in a coffee while still having your habit. Because one of the big problems with coffee is that when people build that habit, that ritual, it's almost harder to break the ritual than the actual
Yeah.
So-
Well, it's the warm liquid, it's the texture, it's all of it, right?
And the bitters. And
yeah.
bitters are usually good for you, so it's a good habit in that way. So.
Yeah. Well, it's a mixed bag, and that's the challenge. So for you would just take chaga on its own in the morning type of thing? Like, how would you hack your coffee? Like, what do you drink in the morning? Just a Cordyceps tea?
I had matcha this morning, but yeah, normally I would put it in the afternoon, For me, usually between noon and 2 p.m. is kind of my tough spot when I know that, especially if I have to get work done, that's my, and that's when the time, if I would have coffee, I would usually have it that time. So I would do half and half. So I essentially only have half a cup of coffee and add mushrooms to it. So I'm still getting the flavor and the kind of the neurotransmitter activating parts of the coffee, but I would have it in a much, much, much less taxing form. So plus a lot of these medicinal mushrooms are bitter. They don't taste anything like your normal portobello mushroom. So one of the reasons why they are sold in capsules or why people haven't taken them into their daily ritual, even though they have all these scientific evidence, is they taste straight up bad. Like they taste bad, very bitter. But the two bitters that people usually like is cacao or chocolate and coffee. So adding it to your hot cocoa or adding it to your coffee might be a great way of both making the coffee or the hot cocoa healthier, but also a fun way and an enjoyable way of consuming these mushrooms.
Yeah, and buffering the flavors here and there.
Oh, totally. A lot.
Yeah. And look, there's the translation for Kung Fu actually has two. One is work hard, like hard work, right? And the other one is eat bitter.
Oh,
and
is it?
It's
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and it's part of the culture in Chinese is like, look, you want to get ahead in life, eat bitter. And, we know that the epigenetic expression of all sorts of wonderful things happen in the gut and, all sorts of things happen with bitters because traditionally that's been the flavor of medicine, right?
Yeah.
And so, and we have just such a terrible palate for that in the West because we're so hooked on sweets.
Oh, totally.
Right, and so like our palate doesn't even know what to do with bitter, and so I'd say getting a little bitter and working bitter into your life is probably a good thing.
And for kids, we have a lot of people who are are parents, so that's a good habit to teach for your kids a little bit before a meal. Have a little bit of bitter first to kind of teach them for that palate. Probably going to serve them later on. So.
Yeah, I love that. So there's all sorts of other stuff, right? Aside from the dietary kind of medicinal stuff, you got, guys using mushrooms to break up trash and oil spills. And, now mushrooms are being used as compost for fertilizer for soil and all that. So I'd love to get into, we got Earth Day coming up and all sorts of interesting kind of movement around what mushrooms can do and what the promise of mushrooms are. And again, it's almost like this forgotten kingdom, if you will.
Yeah.
How else can we use mushrooms?
Oh, we're just learning so much all the time. I've now seen people make surfboards out of them. I've seen IKEA use them in packaging, and it's amazing what you can do with them. So essentially, especially the mycelium, so a quick mushroom lingo thing, we talk how we want to use the visible part of the mushroom, the actual mushroom of the fungi.
And that includes the whole thing, right? So
yeah,
that's a mushroom.
Yeah, and it pops up, Reishi pops up once a year and stuff like that. But then the roots will live a long time. For example, the world's oldest and largest living organism is this honey mushroom in Eastern Oregon that is size of about 20,000 basketball courts. So one mushroom, one cell level thick. So think of one, like our skin has what, 6, 7? I don't, you probably remember.
Layers,
better.
yeah, sure,
layers.
epithelial,
it has one, and it's 20,000 basketball courts. And
20,000 or 20?
20,000. And it's in Eastern Oregon. It's about 2,000 years old. And these are this mycelial matter that grows everywhere. And it's actually, what it originally did was it's breaking down organic matter. So it's just, so if we would not have mushrooms in I don't know how many years, but in a very short time period, we would have the level of the land would grow because we have all this matter coming in and nobody's composting it. So that's what it does. But interestingly enough, for the Earth Day element, it can also break down a lot of the worst things on the planet. Radioactivity, for example, what they found in Chernobyl, this certain type of mushroom can collect the radioactivity into one hotspot. So essentially it's like a vacuum cleaner of the bad stuff. There's oil spills of how a very good culinary and partly medicinal mushroom, oyster mushroom, can break down diesel. So essentially this oil that has been given to the soil, how you put it in wood shops and it will just take it away. Or these chemical warfare weapons that, because of fighting, we put into the to our ecosystem, and they're going to be there for a while. We can remove them with mushrooms. So
Wow.
mushrooms are the vacuum cleaners of the cleaning people of the forest. So for Earth Day especially, and if we can start looking at using specific types of mushrooms to remove areas that we've polluted as human beings, there's a lot of promise. There's a lot of ways how we can potentially, save the planet. I always find that really outrageous when people say we're going to save the planet, but essentially help the planet if not. And one of the latest discoveries is one type of mushroom in the Amazon that is actually the first thing that we found that can destroy plastic. It eats plastic. So there's all sayings that because we use plastic everywhere, plastic is not going to go away. Well, actually now there is a mushroom that loves to eat plastic away from the nature. So how we can, as human beings, help nature in that way because these mycelium, we can plant them anyway, in a way. We can put them in specific locations. So there's a lot of promise. There are a lot of smart people working on, a lot smarter than I am, working on very specific problems around the world with very specific types of mushrooms. I'm more interested in the human health, but acknowledging the fact that there's a lot of stuff there. So,
well, and it's like it's a renaissance in stuff. I mean, the shamans knew about it. Our ancestors knew about it, unless you're Anglo-Saxon.
and even they knew about it until few generations.
It just took a hit.
Yeah, it took a hit for a while.
Yeah, and so now it's making a resurgence. I know that you have been putting it into teas, and you have a whole company, and you do what you do to kind of promote getting this out there.
Yeah.
What is it that is kind of the most popular in your line, and what is it that you would want to be the most popular in your line, right?
Well, look, we urban people ask what's in it for me, right?
Sure.
We like to save the planet and help the planet and do all these great things and support charity, but first we ask what's in it for me. And for a lot of people it is coffee. So we do sell mushroom coffee, and that's clearly the thing that gets people's attention, because if you know that you can get a better for you coffee. And the second one is the hot cocoa, is like if you know that what if you could serve your kids a healthy hot chocolate, people get excited. Like
no sugar added kind of thing.
Yeah, like a healthy alternative to the habit, and also giving them a little bit this immune supporting and adaptogenic properties in smaller dosages, So people get excited of those. I think the mushroom coffee is probably going to be the California roll of mushrooms. So same way as, I don't know, I guess California got it first, but just like 10 years ago, my mom was shocked that somebody would eat raw fish,
Sure.
So it's sushi is a fairly new thing. Obviously here it's a little bit longer time, but people were scared of sashimi. But when people bought a California roll that isn't going to look like raw fish, so it was like an entry-level product, like the gateway thing. And I think mushroom coffee is going to be that for a lot of the fungi stuff. And I think when people feel the health benefits in any way, is it through Chaga or Reishi, or is it through psychedelics, they realize that the power of the fungi, and they realize that what it can do for you and also for others, they get humble. They get like, whoa. And then you're like, okay,
It actually makes me think a lot about that, because the psychedelic element is you're almost tapping into a collective consciousness of an ancient kingdom that has been there as kind of like the basis of like life for a very long time.
Yep.
And it's almost like an information network that we tend to not really access, given the foods we consume and the company we keep. So there's a lot layered there, and I'd love to kind of unpack that and explore it in future shows with you, because this is fascinating. This is fascinating stuff to me. It's ancient wisdom and ancient medicine for modern people who are looking for answers in all the wrong places. And obviously the big pharma is making billions of dollars exploiting this kingdom kind of in a hush-hush way, because they're getting all these drugs out of it and quote-unquote patenting life.
Yep.
And here we go. It's right in front of me, right?
Yeah.
And this is what grew. This is the life that grew out of other life that has a really interesting narrative. So, hey, I love what you're doing. I want to keep up with this. I'd like to actually, take a mushroom challenge and start doing some of this and kind of experiencing it in my own life and report back to my audience, because I'm in. This is Awesome stuff. So tell us where we can find your work and where we can find out more about the products you've put together. And by the way, he was at my book launch event, and I started getting, and I was so busy signing books and being off, and I started getting all this feedback from people saying, hey, that mushroom stuff that came in your little goodie bag thing, that stuff was awesome. Here he is. Tero's the guy. So it was really, really like well received by the 200-300 people that were at that party.
Yeah, awesome. That was a fun event. Yeah, so my company's name is Four Sigmatic, very geeky name. We're kind of geeky guys, but or the Finnish fungi sometimes people call us. But yeah, Four Sigmatic. You can find us from Whole Foods to Amazon to Thrive, whatever. So it's foursigmatic.com. If there's like couple call to action, we launched a free mushroom academy. So if this got you excited of mushrooms, we have about I think 12 videos and written content on just learning the one-on-one on mushrooms. It's free. It's you can find it on our website, and just learn more. Like that's already a lot. Just like spending 1 hour of learning more, I think will be pretty interesting.
I'm excited. Like I'm doing it. Like I want to know. Spell Four Sigmatic just so we know it's
FOUR. So number 4.
Yeah, but written out FOUR.
FOUR SIGMATIC. So essentially, if you take all the world's plants, so essentially like we want to represent the 50 most researched foods in the world, and about 10 of them are mushrooms. So essentially, if you take all the world's foods and you look at their nutrient density, it's like in a lot of science, it will form a normal distribution, a bell curve. And from the mean, every standard deviation is called a sigma, and 4 sigmas mean it's better than 99.9999% of the world's foods. Very geeky, but that's what it means.
But it means something very special. Yeah. Hey, thank you for doing the work that you do. Thank you so much for this. Y'all have seen me drinking out of this from here on in. This is my new tea mug right here, and it carries some good cheese. So thanks for coming out and fighting traffic, and thanks for doing what you do.
Thanks a lot for having this podcast.